All right, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming. I can see that people are starting to join our webinar. My name is Carla Whitaker. I am hosting this webinar through CalSOAP. That's the California Student Opportunity and Access Program. And we have these webinars about once a month on a topic that's kind of appropriate for that time in the school year. Everything that CalSOAP does always has to do with helping students access a college education, and everything that we do is free to the public. In terms of tonight's webinar, it will be from about 6 to 7 o'clock. It is recording right now, and actually before the end of this week, the recording, as well as the slide deck that I'm going to be using, is going to be up on our CalSOAP website. So I'm going to actually put that in the chat right now. It's calsoapsandiego.org/blog. That's where the blog part is, where we put any blogs, newsletters, recorded webinars, anything like that. And it will also include the slide deck that I'm using. So I just want to assure everybody that that will be available before the end of this week on our CalSOAP website. Also, because Zoom has been using my email address to remind you, you probably have my email address, which is kkwhitaker@ucsd.edu, and you are welcome to use that to ask me any questions. Now, today you'll notice that the chat is open to me and my panelist. However, it's not open to you. We're just using it to post links and things like that. So if you have a question at any time tonight, if you would please put it in the Q&A. If you're on a device, you'll probably see the Q&A, or if you tap your screen, you might see it at the Zoom bar at the bottom of your screen. There should be a question and answer. And in there, you can type any questions that you have, and we will do our best to answer. I am happy to have Oscar Sanchez with us here tonight. He is currently a college student. He himself has both filled out a FAFSA or DREAM Act every year of college, as well as helped other people do so. And so he's going to be the person doing his best to answer the questions. However, if there's something that he's not sure about or that he thinks would be good to share with the group, he's going to unmute himself and he will ask me to address a question out loud. So I'm happy to do that. So again, please feel free to put any questions in the Q&A. And again, this is going to be listed on our calsoapsandiego.org website on the blog portion before the end of this week, as well as the slide deck. Tonight's subject is financial aid, understanding the financial aid process. Especially this is targeted for 12th graders and their families, support staff, guardians, that type of thing. And also we'll talk a little bit about how to get an FSA ID. And we do love questions. We try our best to answer them. So we're going to be doing that if you use the Q&A. All right, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started and share my screen. Give me just one moment, and I'll be doing that in a second. Pardon the delay, everybody. my internet is being slow, but just give me one moment and I will pull it up. All right, so we are able to get started now. So this is targeted for the class of 2025. If you're already currently a college student, some of the information might apply to you, some might not, or maybe if you're a junior in high school or younger, same thing. If you do have questions about your specific grade level or level in school, let us know, but most of the information that I'm covering is going to be targeted toward the high school graduating class of 2025. So this year's seniors or 12th graders. Again, we are CalSOAP. We are part of the California Student Aid Commission. CalSOAP exists locally in San Diego and Imperial counties. Our whole mission is to increase the college going rates, especially among our low income and first generation students. We serve San Diego and Imperial counties. Specifically, we work a lot with the San Diego Unified School District, Sweetwater, Grossmont, and Oceanside School District. And one of the ways that you can keep in touch with us is to follow us on our social media. We are on Facebook and X at San Diego CalSOAP. And I would say our most active postings are probably on Instagram, and that's at CalSOAP San Diego. If you don't do social media, we also have a website, calsoapsandiego.org, and we try to keep things updated there as best we can as well. Okay, so getting right into the subject, what is financial aid? Financial aid is any money given to students that are pursuing their education options after high school. This could be for a 2-year college, like a community college. It could be for a 4-year university. It could be for a trade or vocational school. And also, financial aid doesn't mean just one type of thing. It could include grants. It could include scholarships. It could include loans. It could include work study, and it can include state funded, like, for example, state of California funded aid. So when we say financial aid, we're not only talking about free money, we're also talking about loans, and we're not talking about only one source. It might be coming from the federal government, the state government, from a college, etc. So that is financial aid, is anything being used to pay for college. That is usually from, again, either a government source or a college source. As I mentioned, the different places that your financial aid might come from is some of it might come from the federal government. Some of it might come from the state government. For example, if you're a California resident and going to a college in California, it might come from a college or university itself. It might come from a private organization or a public organization that's funding a grant or a scholarship. But those are the main sources of where that financial aid comes from before it gets to the student. Now, when we're talking about the federal government, the United States government, they offer 3 basic kinds of aid to college students. Number 1 is grants. That's free money that doesn't have to be repaid. It's usually based on, quote, financial need. We'll talk about what's the definition of need. The other one that they will offer is loans. Now, this is borrowed money that you would have to pay back if you opted to take it. And the third is work study. That's earned money, meaning if a college student decides to get a work study job while in college, then their earnings will come in part from this work study grant that is part of a financial aid package at a specific college. So students with work study are definitely sought after on college campuses. Many departments would love to have a work study student working for them because that will pay for part of the student's salary. But that's money that you earn as a student, and you can keep that money and spend it on whatever expenses you need, college related or not. Okay, so what's the difference between all these different kinds of aid? I like to tell people, think that grant equals great. A grant means it is free money. It is gift aid. It does not need to be paid back. It's not like a loan. So if you are offered a grant at any level or at any time in your education, I would strongly recommend that you accept that grant, because the grant is free money. It is gift aid, does not have to be repaid. Where do grants come from? They can come from different sources. If you're going to school in California and you qualify based on need, you might be getting something called a Cal grant or California grant. It might be labeled A or B or C, depending if it's like a community college or a CSU UC or a private or a vocational school. But Cal grant is for California residents that are going to school somewhere in California. If you are or were a foster youth in foster care at age 13 or above, then you might qualify for the Chafee Grant for foster youth. You might also qualify for something called a Pell Grant, and those are up to almost $8,000 a year, every year of undergraduate. And so that comes from the federal government. And by the way, a lot of people will get a Pell Grant and a Cal Grant at the same time if they're going to a California college. You might get something like an EOP grant, like the CASUs have educational opportunity program. And if you're part of EOP based on income and family size, or parent education level, you might be getting some grants from them, like, for example, a book grant. I know they commonly give grants to cover the cost of books at college. And then there are additional state college grants that are funded by specific colleges. Like one example would be UC has what's called a blue and gold program for tuition coverage. So how do you apply for grants? They sound great, right? It sounds like free money. How do you apply? Well, luckily that's just built into a FAFSA or DREAM Act. So if you're filling out a FAFSA or DREAM Act, you're automatically applying to see if you qualify for a grant. Another college-based grant would be, we'll call it the California Community College Promise Grant. That is offered at all the California community colleges. Although sometimes they might have their own Promise Grant on their campus, it's still part of a state program. And it's pretty amazing as far as what they offer, because basically, regardless of parent income, it covers tuition for 2 years, your first 2 years at a California community college. Again, it's for California residents planning to enroll as a first-year student at a California community college. Colleges like Mesa, Miramar, and San Diego City College, they're part of the San Diego Community College District. They have their own promise application. And you might also notice one for, like, for example, for Southwestern or for Grossmont, Cuyamaca, Miracosta, or Palomar College. They'll have their promise application as part of their college application. And so that is another grant. And again, grant means free money that you don't have to repay. And in this case, the promise covers the tuition part, the full-time tuition and fees of a college student for their first 2 years at a California community college. That is pretty amazing. Okay, so there's another form of financial aid called scholarships. Now, like grants, they're also a gift. They do not have to be repaid. That's great. And scholarships can be based on anything the donor wants to base it on. So they can be based on need, financial need, but it could also be based on merit. In other words, something like your academics, your talents, or your achievements. Some scholarships are targeted specifically towards specific groups, like it might be, for example, dependents in a military family. It might be based on your cultural affiliation or your religious affiliation or your ability to do community service or be part of a larger organization. So there are many, many, many different types of scholarships. In a way, that's nice because there's lots of them out there. But in a way, it's a little bit difficult because they each require their own separate application. Now, if you're applying for government and college money, it's basically just one application a year, the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, and you do it once a year, every year you're in college. The deadline's always the same. The questions are always the same. That's easy. And you find out from that any loans you qualify for, any grants you qualify for, everything. Now, scholarships, they could be from a private local organization. They could be from a national organization. They could be from a rich person like Bill Gates, okay? And scholarships offer varying amounts. I've seen scholarships for as little as $100, and I've seen scholarships as big as $250,000. So they literally can be anywhere in the couple $100 range to the $1,000 range to the multiple thousands of dollars ranges, but they each have their own application, and they also each have their own deadline. Unfortunately, it's not like someone is in charge of all scholarships and just says, hey, they're all going to be due March 30th. Every organization that gives them, they can create their own application cycle. So that does make it a little bit of work for the student, but I'll give you a little bit more information about scholarships. But scholarships, if you earn more than one, you can stack them, you can combine them. Many students that I know are not just getting one scholarship, they might be getting a federal grant, a Cal grant. They might be getting a private scholarship, a local scholarship, maybe one from their high school or a national one. You can stack all those together all the way to cover up to the cost of attendance at a college. So it's nice to know that you can apply for more than one scholarship, receive more than one, and many students do receive financial aid and scholarships simultaneously. Oscar, just checking to see if there's any questions yet I should address out loud.
Oh, well, your next slide basically addresses the question is what's the best way to get a scholarship?
Okay, all right. So I'm going to recommend, of course, that you follow us, Cal Soap, on Instagram. We try to post anytime we see a scholarship, an internship, a summer program, an opportunity, but a lot of scholarships. We try to post them on our Instagram. So if you go to at Cal Soap San Diego on Instagram and you look those up, you'll see we try to, as often as possible, we try to post scholarships that we hear about. And we kind of vet them, we check them out. We try to make sure that they are legitimate scholarships from legitimate sources. So I definitely recommend following social media, whether it's Cal Soap, but also you can follow QuestBridge, you can follow Big Future at College Board, but look on social media for organizations that are promoting scholarships, and that is one great place to find them. If you're just beginning your senior year right now, this is the time to look them up and start figuring out a deadline calendar. Oh, I see that the Zombie Apocalypse Scholarship is due October 31st, and I'll remember that because it's Halloween. And yes, that is a real scholarship that's offered. Or I see that the San Diego Foundation Scholarship opens in January and it's due in early March, or whatever it is. You can go in and start finding them now and like make yourself a calendar of when you're going to apply throughout the school year. Another really good source is your high school counseling center, your high school counselor. And if your college has something called like a career center, see if you have a career tech or a college counselor who's specifically, arranging career, college, and scholarship kind of things. And they will also probably have them that they post maybe like in your local high school's bulletin, website, school bulletin, however it is, newsletter, however they get their information out, or their social media is another good one. Also, school districts, like if your school is part of a bigger district, like Sweetwater or Grossmont or San Diego or Oceanside, check out the district listing, see if they have a social media, see if they have a page for scholarships. I know that another one that I look at a lot is the San Diego County Office of Education, also known as SDCOE. They have a scholarships page that they keep current with good scholarships opportunities. And then also, even though there are national scholarships, like for example, there's one due in September called the Coca-Cola Scholarship based on community service, but that we do have local ones, which is nice because the pool of applicants is smaller. Like an example of a local one is the Ford Salute to Education. And if anybody has not yet been to sdfoundation.org, I strongly recommend you go to San Diego Foundation. They have a common scholarship application for a lot of scholarships right here just for San Diego County students. And that's a really nice opportunity. So those are some of my resources I would recommend to find scholarships. I hope that answered the question. Oscar, are there any more scholarship questions?
There's a question about the Promise program.
Okay, what's the question?
The question is, does it only cover tuition, not books, like and other fees like parking?
Correct. It only covers tuition. And when I say fees, I mean like, say, for example, like a student health center fee. The promise itself is not going to cover things like parking or books, etc. However, in order to get the promise, that means that you have to first fill out either a FAFSA or DREAM Act. And depending on what you get back from your FAFSA and DREAM Act, you still might be getting money for those things for a community college that you could spend on parking. You could even spend it on rent. You could spend it on food. You could spend it on supplies. You could spend it on books. So depending what else you might qualify for based on your financial aid profile, you could be getting that. But the promise itself is just for tuition. Okay, and that's the one that is basically regardless of parent income. So your parent income wouldn't be, quote, too high probably at a community college as far as the tuition part. But yes, the other parts like books, rent, food, parking, that you'd have to see if you get extra money from the FAFSA or the DREAM Act. All right. There's also something called work study that I mentioned. When you fill out the FAFSA, you're going to get a report back and it will give you a financial aid package, and it might include work study. If it does, that's a good thing. It means that as a college student, you can work part-time while you're enrolled in college, and it is available to undergraduate students, graduate students, and professional students. It is based on your quote financial need. That's your family size and income that you update every year. And it's administered by colleges that participate in the federal work study program, which almost every college does because it's in their interest to do it. Every time they're using federal work study to pay a student staff member, that means they're not using their own department money. And so even though the student earns a regular hourly rate, that part of that money is coming from federal work study. And so like if you say that you're offered $2,000 a year in federal work study, that means you can keep working all the way up until you earn that amount. And a lot of times departments will keep you on even after you've earned that amount. So if you are a good employee. So, all right, federal work study is another thing you might see in that financial aid package. Now, another thing you might be offered are loans. Now, I do tell people to be cautious because loans are borrowed money and they have to be paid back. Not only paid back, but paid back with interest. You have to start paying it back. You can start anytime you want, but as far as earlier, but the latest you can start is 6 months after being out of school. Like for example, 6 months after earning your degree, or if you start taking a break from college and you take more than 6 months off, that's when you have to start paying it back with interest. Students and families are not required to accept any federal or state loans that are offered to them. So if you fill out the FAFSA or DREAM Act and you're offered a loan, whether it's like subsidized or unsubsidized, just because you're offered the loan does not mean you have to accept it. Okay, so it's up to you. Just know that just because you're offered the loan, you can say yes. You can say yes, but only for half that amount. Or you can decline and say, no, I'm not going to take this loan, or at least not from you. You can choose to take it from a private bank or credit union. So these are good alternatives to fund post-high school options if your total aid is not matching up with the cost of attendance where you're going, then a loan might be something that you decide to look into. But again, I just want to caution people, they know that loans must be paid back and they must be paid back with interest. So what's the difference between, if you're looking at a loan that comes from the government, what's the difference between a direct subsidized versus an unsubsidized loan? Subsidized is based on your financial need. It's available only to undergraduate students, so it's not for grad students, like in a master's or a doctorate program. And the government does not usually charge you interest while you're in school and during your 6-month grace period after you graduate. So if you're offered a subsidized loan, that's truly the best kind because the interest doesn't start clocking yet. An unsubsidized loan, you can qualify regardless of your financial needs. So it's for people from any income bracket. It's available to both undergraduate and graduate students. And on this one, the interest starts ticking as soon as you start taking the loan. So as soon as the loan is dispersed, all the way through the life of the loan, interest is already accruing. So that's just something to be aware of, that if you can choose between those two, if you are offered subsidized, that would be the superior kind, but unsubsidized is probably what you would get from anywhere else anyway, like a bank or a credit union. Do we have any loan questions? All right, doesn't sound like it. Okay, so how do you apply for this money? How do you apply for financial aid? Basically, I would say the vast majority of people will fall into one of these two categories. They'll either fill out the FAFSA, that's the free application for federal student aid, or they'll fill out the California DREAM Act. No one fills out both of these. No one fills out both of these. It will be one or the other. So who is eligible to fill out the FAFSA? If the student has a social security number, usually that means they're a US citizen or a permanent resident, then they fill out the FAFSA. Regardless of the parent status, doesn't matter if the parent is documented or undocumented. If the student has a social security number and they're a US citizen or a permanent resident, they fill out the FAFSA. Also, if you are considered in an immigrant classification of refugee or asylee, or if you have a T visa, you could also fill out the FAFSA. It requires something called an FSA ID, which is where you create an account with a username and password, and the student has one as well as the parent has a different account as well. They each have their own FSA ID account. Okay, what if that doesn't apply to you? Then in that case, if you are not eligible to fill out a FAFSA, then you could probably fill out a California Dream Act if you're going to college somewhere in California. You would not be eligible for any federal aid, like any federal Pell Grants or anything like that, but you would be eligible for state of California aid. So if you do not have a Social Security number, maybe you are in DACA status, which means Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Maybe you have a TPS, a Temporary Protected Status visa, or a U visa, then you would fill out the DREAM Act. Or maybe if you meet AB 540 criteria, which usually means you've been going to school or living in the California for at least 3 years. Now, there is one small category of people who cannot fill out either the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, and that is people who have a non-immigrant visa. I'll show you some examples of that on the next slide. Now, the California Dream Act, you are creating an account, like you make a username and password, but you don't need an FSA ID like you do for the FAFSA. So everyone fills out either the FAFSA or the Dream Act. Nobody fills out both. It's always one or the other. Hopefully you know which classification you are. I do want to quickly mention if you are in that category where you are on a non-immigrant visa, then what your options are. So you might not be eligible to fill out either the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, and that is if you are on a temporary non-immigrant visa. For example, if the student has an E, H, I, L, O, P, or R visa, or if the parent's on a TN visa, which means the student is on a TD visa, unfortunately, you're not able to fill out the FAFSA or the DREAM Act. If it's just a T visa, the students fill out the FAFSA. If it's a U visa, they can fill out the DREAM Act. But if their visa number starts with one of those letters, like H is a common one, unfortunately, you're not able to fill out a FAFSA or a DREAM Act to get financial aid from the US or California government. For these students, you might have to rely on your savings. You might have to rely on loans, and or you might have to rely to scholarships that are open to your category of residency, okay, which might be considered like an international student or a non-immigrant visa holder. So that's kind of a separate category. We don't run into a ton of people in this situation, but there are some. And if this is your situation, I just want you to be aware of that. If that is your situation, that you cannot fill out the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, I really am going to strongly recommend this tuition-free option. It's not only just tuition-free through the promise, California College of Continuing Education doesn't even require a FAFSA, a DREAM Act, any kind of financial aid form. Their classes are just free. So nearly all of their classes are completely free tuition. Sometimes you might have to pay for supplies, okay, but you're not going to have to pay for tuition, and it does not require a financial aid form. It does not require a specific citizenship status, and they have both in-person and online classes and a few different campuses. The kind of classes they offer include automotive, business and accounting, child development, citizenship classes, clothing and textiles, community education, digital media, ESL, healthcare, hospitality, culinary, information technology, and also skilled trades like welding. And there's no age limit. You can be any age. This can be for parents, for students. And again, it's regardless of your citizenship status, and it doesn't matter if you don't have to fill out a financial aid form. So College of Continuing Education is one that I definitely recommend for people, anyone actually, but definitely people that can't fill out a FAFSA or DREAM Act. All right, moving on. So how do you figure out your role in the financial aid process? Like, who is going to be filling out this financial aid form? Well, definitely the student who's going to be in college next year. We have to determine if the parent info will be required. There's a few circumstances when the parent information is not required, and that is if the student is in the military, if they're enlisted at age 18, if the student is married themselves, if the student has a child, if the student is considered a current foster student or ward of the court, or if the student is a homeless unaccompanied minor. In those situations, they're considered independent, and they don't have to get a parent's information. But for pretty much everybody else, you need at least one parent's information. So you need to determine which parent will contribute to the information on your FAFSA or DREAM Act. So we start here kind of in the top left of this graphic. And the first question is, are your parents married to each other? If the parents are married, yes, then you report both parents' income information on the FAFSA. Okay. If they are not married, the next question is, do your parents live together? If they do, then once again, you report both parents' information on the FAFSA. But if they do not live together, now you're choosing one or the other. It doesn't have to be both. So now the question is, this is phrasing from the federal government, not from me. The phrasing is, which parent provided more financial support in the last 12 months? It's interesting that it's phrased this way. It is not specifically phrased as which parent claims you on their tax return. It's not phrased as which parent makes more money. It's phrased as which parent provided more financial support. Now, this is something that they don't really audit, and it is something that it's a little bit subjective. In other words, that could include which one you live with. It could include which one pays for your food and clothes. It could be which one provides your health care. It could be which one provides child support. It kind of, in this situation, if you're in the situation, there are ways to kind of try to make it be one parent or the other. But I'm going to use the official phrasing, which is which parent provided more financial support in the last 12 months. Now, if that's one person, then is that parent remarried? If they're not remarried, then you report only that parent's information, singular. If that parent is remarried, yes, then you report both the parent and the step parent's information if they're remarried. Now, if there's a question like, I don't live with my parents at all, or my parents live in a different country, or I am not in a secure housing situation, like I am essentially without a permanent address right now, that's something that you really want to talk to an individual. Like Cal Soap has workshops where you can talk to someone like Oscar who can help you with that situation, or you can talk to a school counselor or a staff member that will maybe help you through a tricky situation if you're not if you don't have like a parent that you live with, you're not living with either parent, okay? But generally for a lot of people, probably one of these situations will apply for them. Any questions, Oscar?
There is no question so far.
Okay. All right. So the FAFSA, if you have not heard, has recently changed. It went through a Simplification Act. Usually it opens October of senior year, but in 24-25, it's undergoing this major overhaul. And for the class of 2025, the FAFSA you're going to fill out is going to be the 25-26 FAFSA. I know that sounds weird because that's not this year, but that's the first year you're going to be a college student after you graduate high school. So that's the FAFSA you're going to fill out. And the FAFSA DREAM Act priority deadline in California, as far as we know, it will still be March 2nd of 2025. And they just announced that instead of October, because they're trying to still work out some bugs, the FAFSA is going to be released December 1st of 2024. So if you're a senior, unfortunately, if you were planning to fill it out in October or November, unless you get chosen to be one of the test students, they have a few of these, then probably for most people, you're not going to be able to fill it out until December 1st. But you can get an FSA ID now, and you can get ready to start filling it out and know what they're going to ask you. You just can't fill it out for real until December 1st. I feel like I'm doing a lot of air quotes. So I apologize for that. One of the new terms that's on the FAFSA is called the contributor. The contributor is always the student, okay? They're required to provide their information on the form. But another contributor could be like a parent, or if the student's married, it could be their spouse, or if they have an adoptive parent, it could be their adoptive parent. However, the term contributor doesn't necessarily mean that that person contributes money. It's saying that they're contributing their information, such as their tax return information. So contributing doesn't mean that you're contributing any money necessarily. It just means you're contributing information. Okay. So what is the FSA ID process for students? Remember, this is only for the FAFSA. This is not for the DREAM Act, but if you are one of the students filling out the FAFSA, then students, you will need to create an FSA ID. They're going to be asking for your full legal name. They'll ask for your birth date, your social security number, your address, your email address, and your phone number. Although phone number is optional, I strongly recommend it for backup. And email address, I'm going to say if you have a school assigned email address like at guhsd.net or at sandy.net, or even a Gmail that's assigned by your school, I would use a personal Gmail because you want to use something you're going to have even after you graduate from high school. After you complete getting this FSA ID, students, you need to save and write down your username, your password, and your backup code. All right. There's also a number you can call to help, but like one of the most common problems we have is students can't remember their password or their username. So that's something you need. I'm also going to point out that I usually tell people not to share their social security number in most situations. Don't share it with me, for example. Don't email it to me. Don't give it to just any person. When you're entering your social security number, this is going to be on a .gov website, not .com. .gov for government, and it's going to have that little lock symbol in the URL. That's the only time that I would encourage people to share something like their social security number. That's your private number. It can be used for identity theft, and you want to keep it safe. So you will need to know it if you have one. But again, make sure you're entering this on a .gov website or a website that has a little secure lock. Okay, the parent or parents that are a contributor or contributors, they must also have their own FSA ID with their own email address. You cannot share an email address with your student. So at least one contributor parent will need to create their FSA ID, or maybe they already have one if they're already a borrower, or if they already have their own FAFSA, or they already have another student in college. But if they don't, they'll create an account again with their name, their birth date, their social security number if they have one. If not, that's okay. There's a little box to check for I don't have a social security number, their address, email address, and phone number. And you have to have an email address. It is now required. They no longer just allow a phone number. It has to be an email address. And then again, parents, just like students, parents, you need to write down your username and password, your backup code. And I kind of recommend that you either take a photo of the screen or print a photo so that you have something to refer to. All right, they'll ask you, confirm, is this really your legal name? Make sure it matches your school transcript. Sometimes the funniest things create a non-match. Like if you have a hyphenated last name, some records might have it hyphenated, some might have it as two separate names. Believe it or not, something as small as that can trigger a mismatch in the system. Okay, or sometimes somebody enters a birth date that's their parent's birth date instead of the student, or vice versa. Little things like that. They get two numbers of their social security number transposed or something. So they'll make sure that you have all the information you need to actually create the account. And parents and students, now is the time, if you're going to be filling out the FAFSA starting December 1st, now is the time when you can get an FSA ID and start getting all this information together. So what is this financial aid form going to ask you? Okay, what kind of questions are you going to see on there? They're going to ask family size. How many people live in your house? That includes everybody, students, parents, grandparents, roommates, aunts, uncles, cousins, whatever, everyone but the dog. Okay. Also, they'll ask for student and parent income if there is any. If there's not, that's okay. But you have to give permission to connect to your IRS tax return. Even if you don't fill out a tax return because you're under a certain income or you're not working, that's okay. You just have to give them permission so that if there are any tax records that they can connect to them. They're also going to ask for any student and parent assets, such as any savings you have, any 529 college savings plans, any investments like stocks and bonds, and anything like a rental property. Okay. It'll also ask the value of any business if you own a business, or any farm if you own a farm. Okay, so all of that goes into income and assets. However, there are some things that are, if you want to call it, protected from the FAFSA, meaning they will not require you to put it down. And that is the value of the home you live in. Whether you rent it or own it, they're not going to ask for the value of the home you live in, nor will they require a value of a retirement account like a 401k, or a 403b. That's because that is retirement income. It's not supposed to be used as college money. So that is, if you want to call it protected, that's not considered part of the assets. The parent income also, even if parents, you say, sorry, they're 18, I'm cutting them off. The government does not play that way. And they say, well, until the student is age 24, we're still going to consider your parental income until that student is age 24. Unless, and there's those circumstances I mentioned, unless they're in the military, married, have their own kid, might be in a homeless situation or a foster youth. Other than those independent situations, parent income still keeps getting counted every year they're in college until age 24. All right, and this is what everyone really wants to know and why you're here tonight. And this is the big website that I'm going to give you and encourage you to go on it right away. you want to know how much financial aid will we receive. Now, I can't tell you how many scholarships because I don't know which ones you're qualified for and which ones you're going to be able to earn and how many and what amounts. So I can't help with that part. But as far as need-based financial aid, I can help you get a little bit of an idea of what you might qualify for. Okay. It is going to depend on your family size, your income, and your assets, of course. It's also going to depend on what college you go to and the cost of attendance. If I'm the government, I'm not just going to say I'm handing out $5,000 to everybody, regardless of what college you're going to. Of course, it's going to be a little lower if you're going to a college with lower tuition. Like there's a difference between the community college tuition, the CSU is more expensive, the UC is more expensive, and then private colleges and universities are the most expensive. So it's going to depend on the cost of attendance. All right. Colleges are going to send their applicants who are accepted. If you're accepted to a university, they're going to send your financial aid package. If it's a four-year university, they usually send that to you in March or April. If it's a community college, it depends when you're applying. Okay, so this is the tool that you want to use to predict your future aid and something called your SAI, your Student Aid Index. It used to be called an EFC. I strongly recommend you go to this website. You go to studentaid.gov/aid estimator. If you go to that aid estimator, you can enter fake information. And I'm saying that because they'll ask like for a birthday. I would say use like your birthday year, but you don't have to use the actual month or date. Okay. It'll ask your state of residency. It'll ask for parent income, student income, assets, what you paid in income tax, et cetera, et cetera. But again, this isn't an official form. It's just a fun calculator estimator. And then based on that, it will say, here's what we think is your SAI, your student aid index. Here's if you qualify for a federal grant, we think this is how much you'll qualify for. And if you qualify for other things, it'll let you know. Now, there's also some unofficial SAI calculators out there. Like, for example, mefa.org has one. Also, an organization called gettocollege.org has one. I can't necessarily endorse these because they're unofficial. But they kind of use that same formula that the studentaid.gov aid estimator uses. But studentaid.gov is going to be the most accurate, up-to-date federal information. So I strongly recommend you go to aid estimator and play around with it. Enter an income, then enter another income. Enter a fake income, make it really high, make it really low. See how that affects your SAI, because it's just a form to play with, so to speak. It's not anything official. It's just that gives you an idea of what you might qualify for as far as need-based aid. Okay, so I mentioned this SAI thing. What is it? SAI is a number. Okay, to make it even more complicated, it can be a negative number. It can range all the way as low as negative $1,500, or it could be $0, or it could be $2,000, or it could be anything all the way up to almost $1 million. Okay, so your SAI is based on your family size and income, and it can be very low or middle or high. If your SAI is a negative number, or if it's 0, student would probably qualify for the maximum Pell Grant, which is $8,000 a year. And they probably also qualify for other state grants, college grants, and other forms of financial aid. I can't tell you how much because it depends on a lot of factors, like what's the college, what's the cost of attendance. But if your SAI is negative or 0, you would probably, I could probably say pretty safely that you would qualify for the Pell Grant. I think it's 7,000 something. It's like just under 8,000 a year. Now, if your SAI is maybe somewhere all the way up to as high as maybe $1,500, the student might qualify for a low-income program, like, for example, CSU's Educational Opportunity Program. They're usually looking at students with an SAI somewhere between negative 1,500 and positive 1,500, and they'll even consider if an SAI is all the way up to 2,000. Now, let's say that your SAI is higher than 2,000. That might mean that you would qualify for either less need-based aid or maybe even no need-based aid. And in that case, they might offer you loans, but remember that you'd have to consider whether or not you want to take that loan, and that loans must be repaid. But hopefully you can go on that estimator and look up, what your SAI is, get an idea, at least if you know, okay, well, my SAI is above 2,000, and it's saying that I might not qualify for anything but loans. That is your sign. It's time to look for scholarships. All right. So use that estimator. You can't fill out the real FAFSA till December 1st, but that estimator will hopefully give you an idea of what to expect. Now, you cannot hold me to this because things change again based on size, situation, grant funding, things from year to year. But I created a fake estimator today, and I put in a fake family size of 4. I made the annual family income $75,000 a year. That could be one parent who works and makes that much, and the other parent is a homemaker, or it could be maybe one parent makes $40,000 a year and one makes $35,000 a year. But let's say that that's the total annual family income. I said that they didn't really have any assets like stocks and bonds and businesses and things like that. And I got a predicted student aid index of about $0, which it's not that that's good or bad, but it's good in terms of that means that they would qualify probably for a federal Pell Grant and probably other need-based, grants or financial aid as well. So again, it's every time you enter a different family size, different family income, different assets, you're going to get a different predicted SAI, but at least you can get an idea of what your SAI might be. And that SAI is kind of like the magic number that college financial aid offices focus on. That's how they start dispersing the package to students. So that's an important number to know. By the way, it doesn't, if your SAI is like $40,000, that doesn't mean that that's a bill and that you're going to pay $40,000. Not at all. Not at all. But it does mean that you might, the higher it is, you might not qualify for need-based aid, but it's not a bill. Okay. It's nothing that it's not a bill. Okay. So what about merit aid? If you don't qualify for need-based aid because your quote family income is too high, which I know that sounds ridiculous because none of us make enough, right? But there is also something called merit aid. You might qualify for it. Again, it might be based on something like your ethnicity, your community service. It might be based on athletics. It might be based on the military. It might be based on gender. It might be based on like you want to do a STEM career, a journalism career, whatever it is. So there's all these different types of scholarships for different people. There's essay contests, lots of things. But even if you're looking for merit-based aid, if I'm a college financial aid office, all the money has to go through me. Even if it's merit aid I'm giving, the first thing the college financial aid office wants to look for is that you've filled out either a FAFSA or a DREAM Act. Even if your SAI is low, high, whatever, even if it's for merit-based aid, they always want to see that first. They always want to see that you've done that. They have to have some kind of financial aid application on file for you. So I strongly recommend, even if you're like, why fill it out? We're not going to get anything. You never know. There might be merit-based aid. And also, if you want to fill out something like the San Diego Foundation Common Scholarship, they require that you have filled out a FAFSA or DREAM Act just to apply for their scholarship. So again, even if it's for like a merit-based or an affiliation-based or an identity-based scholarship, please fill out a FAFSA or DREAM Act just to cover yourself, okay? And then what the College Financial Aid Office does is they package multiple sources together. They can package federal grants and state grants and college grants and any loans you have, work study if you have it. They can add multiple scholarships from multiple sources if you're lucky enough to get them. And all of that together can stack up all the way to the cost of attendance. Now, if it goes above the cost of attendance, they'll probably reduce their aid until it's at the cost of attendance. Okay, so you're not going to quote make money off of scholarships, like earning extra money for your dream car or whatever. But up to the cost of attendance, they will package all of that together. And yes, you can get multiple things at the same time. So I know that there's this dangerous term I hear all the time, like, where can I get a full ride? Who offers a full ride? There's not really such thing as a full ride that all comes from one source. Usually what it means is if all these things are packaged together and they all go up to the cost of attendance, that's not just tuition, that's also like room and board and supplies and things like that. But that is how you get the cost of attendance covered. It's not from one magical source called the free ride source. That doesn't exist. All right.
There's a good question in the chat, Carla.
Okay.
The question is, does SAI is equal to EFC?
Yes, basically the SAI used to be called EFC. They are changing a couple things about how they calculate it. And also, like, one of the things that's different is in the old form of EFC, the lowest it could be was 0. And now with the new SAI, the lowest it could be is actually a negative number, like negative 1,500 or negative 1,000 or negative 500. So that's one difference. But basically, for most intents and purposes, yeah, the SAI is what EFC used to be. Yep. All right. Okay. I do want to mention, as if you haven't heard enough about financial aid forms, there's one more. It's called the CSS profile. We jokingly refer to it as FAFSA's nosy cousin. And this is a financial aid form that's required in addition to the FAFSA by some private and out-of-state universities. If you go to CSS Profile's website, it's part of collegeboard.org, and it will give you a list of the universities that require the CSS profile. Some examples of these universities that require the CSS are like Brown, Caltech, Harvard, NYU, Yale, Stanford, a lot of privates and a lot of out of states. And what they're basically doing is they're saying, hey, you filled out the FAFSA, that's great, but we're going to get even more nosy. We're going to ask even more questions about your finances. And so if you're going to a college and you get accepted there and they're requiring it in addition to the FAFSA, that's just one more financial aid form you do have to fill out. It's a valid form. It is one of the few forms that does cost money. The cost is $25 plus $16 per college that you send it to. However, if the family adjusted gross income annually is under $100,000, you will get a fee waiver so that covers the CSS profile. So I'm just letting you know, if you're considering a private or out-of-state university, just check CSS and see if that's one of the forms they require, but it would be not instead of the FAFSA, it would be in addition to the FAFSA. Okay, so it's senior year. I want to just leave you with some idea of some of the things that CalSOAP has coming up. We have, again, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram. We have a website, calsoapsandiego.org. We have programs that are coming up. We have some Jumpstart Senior Year programs. We just had one at Hilltop High last Saturday. On September 7th, we're having one at Oceanside High. September 14th, we're having one at City College. Later in a Saturday in October, we're having one in the Grossmont District. We have monthly webinars like this one. The next one I'll be doing in a couple weeks, I think it's November 11th, is how to write your UCPIQs and college application essays. We also have a monthly newsletter that we put on our blog. We have college readiness coaches like Oscar who help students fill out the FAFSA when it comes December 1. We have a college fair. We're doing a free college fair at Mesa College, October 23rd. It's a Wednesday evening. Like almost 100 colleges will be there. Come out, check out, talk to a college. We do Cash for College workshops to help people fill out the FAFSA and DreamActs. We have summer melt programs, summer programs like swag. We have a lot of opportunities going on. So I just want to make sure that you are aware and can connect with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, and thank you, Oscar, for putting that estimator in the chat. So at this point, I'm going to just go ahead and stop and see if there's anything in the Q&A that hasn't been answered yet that I could answer. All right, I'm not hearing anything, so I'm assuming we're all done, and I will go ahead and end the webinar now. But again, if you go to our calsoapsandiego.org blog, by Friday, this recording will be up on there, as well as access to the slide deck. Congratulations, everybody who's in your senior year. You're in the home stretch. You're almost done. It's going to be a great year, and I hope we can support you, and good luck to everybody. Good night, and thank you for coming.